on the operational data back into new building design stages. So I'm pleased to invite Marorka to take part in this talk and talk a little bit in more detail about how they extracted and best utilised. Introduce Fridtjof, come up and introduce the talk and get things going. Thank you.
So, good morning. We'll start from here. Okay. Well, here we are. So, ladies and gentlemen, having a speech is always a bit like singing a song. You have to know the rhythm and you have to know the text. But in this case, I'm free to talk about 10 minutes. I promise I'll be much shorter. Nobody likes to sing long songs. Generally speaking, I want to discuss with you about the possibility to take the big data on a bigger chain of development and how we can make use of that, much more from the bird-eye perspective than on the very, very big details. But of course they come anyhow. Not working.
Oh.
Not working? Here it comes. We want to draw a full picture. We want to draw a full picture from the design stage of the vessel, the operation, and the new target setting for the new design. And this is independent if we're talking about ships, if we're talking about aeroplanes, if we're talking about whatever industry. We have to learn about the use of it, set new targets, and do a new design. And especially when it comes to ships, in the design stage, we are fixing the targets. We are fixing us to some cargoes, quantities, qualities, specialities. We are fixing speeds. We are creating a hull form to the targets. We are not only creating a hull form to dive for the design point, we are fixing it for the operational profile. We have to optimize every single thing on ship to the targets to get the most efficient vessel, the lowest carbon footprint, and so on. And in a very early stage, you fix so much from the Capex, from your costs. You fix them in the earliest stages, long before the vessel is already finalized, designed, long before the vessel is trading. So the big portion of the money is fixed on a very early stage. During operation, you have to live with the design as it is. You have to, absolutely, you can change some speeds, but you might be not efficient in that speeds anymore. If you don't have the cargo as you were targeting on, of course you are less efficient. You're using a vessel as good as you can, and you only change when it's getting expensive, maybe change a Goldbo's bow to a turbocharger cut-off, things like that, to adjust to new targets. But basically, trying to change some limits, things like that, is an expensive exercise. So you're using the ship as it is. But when setting the targets, and now it comes, you have to have a mix of experience and expectations as a part of your knowledge. So you have to set the targets because you know that at the beginning of the design you fix a huge portion of the costs. So you set the targets based on your experience, so based on the operation. So far so good. This is how it's acting, this is how it's working since centuries. But also since centuries, keeping this in mind, in shipping, now this is a big difference in the airline industry. We have somebody who is the cargo owner. He is dealing with somebody who is called the charterer. Very often the charterer does not know what's in the container. He just knows there's a container. And all of us know we're not that specific in even the weight of the container. Then we have a manager. We have an owner. The owner buys the ship from the yard, but very often, especially today, the yard's not the designer anymore. So we have a designer on the end of the information link designing a vessel to a cargo, but in between, the information flow goes through a number of hands. And unlucky to the industry, this one is not working good. Unlucky to the industry, all between have brokers. Very often, the owner and the manager, what's that? So very often, the owner and the manager, they know each other. Sometimes with a broker in between when starting the business. But it's too many managers not even discussing with their charterers. So being far away from the targets of the cargo, from the reason to do shipping. And the designer is so far away from that he's designing based on data not known. Marorka is building up these data. We can extract 200, 500 data points every 5 seconds and get to know the data on the ship. The cargoes, the speeds, the drafts, the trim, and all of that. Temperatures, and so on. And this is, we want transparency. We want transparency all over the chain of the industry to get to learn the demand of the cargo, the demand of the speed for the today's operation, but also, of course, to learn that for the next generation of ships. Why building a ship of 27 knots when 19 is enough? We're learning that. We're learning about things like that. So, operation as it is today, but also getting into the next developments with the right set of data. This is very important. And as I promised, I'll be fast. Thanks a lot.
Fridtjof, we talk about data, and that link showed there's a great number of intermediaries between the cargo and the designer. Have you seen any examples where the cargo owner actually does begin to have conversations about what kind of ship that they want to utilise and want to use in the future? I'm just thinking of the way that line can be more circular, effectively, to make that feedback. I'm just trying to look at how that feedback loop can actually start to be generated.
It's still very, very few examples, absolutely. We have just shortly, this week, made some contracts where the charterer says, I want the data which the manager grabs on board of a ship. So he wants to say having access to our data, and the owner, manager agrees to that. So they can have a combined learning. They are one of the first ones really saying, yes, we want to play that as open as we can to operate the ships in the best way. And since they are using their ships commonly over a while, they also have the chance to collect those data for the next new builds.
Do you see that as a growing trend? Do you believe that's going to be a growing trend as cargo owners take a stronger interest in the aspects of the maritime industry that they've previously not really understood? And is it because of the data that's available that's driving that interest and that awareness?
It's absolutely, and it's the demand. It's the demand of knowing your carbon footprint. It's the demand of knowing, let's say, the timing of your cargo. It's the demand of getting much closer to your expenses, knowing where they are. And the chain of brokers, this is easily 10% loss of economy. And of course, it's a data loss. Yeah? So people are no longer willing to do that.
But one of the issues, and it's a topic that has crept into the discussions yesterday and on Tuesday, and the disruptive talks, is around the ownership of the data and getting, who owns the data, and can they? You talked about it a little bit here about opening up the data, making it more freely available to be utilised in a more productive way. Is that, how do we break that block, if you like, to create that opportunity?
Marorka is of course not in the position to open the data to third parties. Absolutely not. But if the parties agree by themselves that they share the data, then it's a win-win for both of them. And those ones who found it really out, they are really the lucky ones. In my former life, I made a ship design. So I was working on a shipyard as a designer, and always I was just discussing among the chain. I was only talking to the owner, but I know the owner. Not enough data to give to me to provide the best solution for him. Only one example I had within 15 years, where I had the charterer being the cargo owner as well, the owner being the manager as well, and me sitting on one table. And honestly, those were the best ships ever, because we exactly could build them for that trade, and could exactly say, if you are faster in port, we can save the money during sea, and this is the reason why we spend a bit money for your shore operation, and we can build in a smaller engine. And I think I don't remember the facts in the moment, but it was at least something like 5%, 8% less CO2 emissions, less fuel consumption.
So that's a practical example of having everybody really sitting down together and actually talking about what they want, and
those companies still share the data. We from Marorka side, we can collect the data, we can make them visible, we can extract everything, every knowledge of that. But to use it in the full chain, in the full circle, all along from the cargo to the design, this is a different story. That has to have openness.
Okay. Good. I'm going to ask Jenny, Sasan and Kristin to come up onto the stage now, our other panellists for this discussion, because I want to get the involvement now of other aspects of the chain to talk about how they see the data being used. And of course, we've got here our two startups, effectively, and Jenny representing the technology businesses in around the Copenhagen area. And a lot of people will know that in Denmark, in Copenhagen, there's a very strong maritime cluster, I think, where you've got a lot of technology companies, but you've also got a lot of ship owners. So you've got that engagement, I would suggest, between the owners and the technology companies. What are your thoughts about this ability to better utilise the data from your members within your association, being able to access that data? How do you see that being better utilised?
I think, first of all, we need to find a way to share it, but I also think it's a huge challenge, because one thing is in the theoretical level to say we need to share our information as companies, but it's also a competition factor for you. So when you go in and say, we can sit down around the table and we can design a ship with all these components, and I think actually when I looked at the presentation before, there was a little bit a lack of all the suppliers for the ship, because one thing is to have the shipyard and the ship owner, but you also have to include all the technology companies, who's actually all of them having a lot of information. But before putting this together, you also need to look into the quality of data, and I think they are not always so good that you can actually build a ship on it.
There was Jenny's right, in that diagram that you showed, that linear, you've got the cargo owner, you've got the owner, the manager, you've got the yard and the designer. There wasn't the equipment makers in that mix.
The equipment makers are, of course, so to say, in the level of the yard, because they are in the process of building, and the good equipment makers, let's say the bigger components, they are of course also part of the design. That's for sure. Yeah? So I had to simplify. That's absolutely correct. It's absolutely right. The quality of data, the quality of data is quite essential, because if sensors are broken, but you still, let's say, believe in those, of course you come to a wrong decision. But especially my feeling of the last, let's say, last year, our customers don't want to talk about quality of data anymore. They simply say the quality of data must be there. So if you don't validate your data enough, you are out of business. So that's the point. But still, absolutely, validation has to be better and better. not to base anything on scrap.
Is it also when you talk about the data, and I've been talking to a couple of companies recently who say that the quality of data has to be there, but it may not be there. How do you know whether you're getting the quality data or erroneous data? The engine performance values, the temperatures, the pressures, how do you know that the sensors are giving you that right quality that you can use? Or is it that you're getting the differentials that understand that there is a change in performance?
Basically, you have to do some validation checks. You can do a number of those directly online, basically speaking. So to say if a draft sensor is broken or it stands still, as an easy example, you see it's never changing, so it must be broken. So if it's broken, it's wrong. So like a clock. A clock standing still is twice a day right, but you never know when. So that's the point. And for other sensors, it's the same. But it needs to have also a bit of a professional crew checking that sensors are still working, and, as you say, suppliers coming on board from time to time and checking their equipment on board. It's absolutely necessary.
I want to turn out to Kristin, please, because can you tell me from your perspective and Anchoring Solutions, the sort of type of data that you think is important in the quality issue, please?
Type of data for quality issues, I guess, when you have a fuller picture of what's happening, when you have sets that you can check against each other, then it's easier to validate and do the possibility checks even automatically. And I know a lot of the suppliers have actually been putting quite a lot of focus on making that possible. And I think the systems today, they really facilitate that the data can be used in ways that we haven't seen before, making the industry a lot more efficient and possibility to, let's say, facilitate more efficient business.
And what about the sort of speed of the feedback as well, that data, the ability to feed that back? I mean, Fridtjof, to feed that back into the operational aspects, I can understand, but in terms of the value of returning that back to the design process, what sort of data do you need? How much data will actually be validated to improve a design? Because you could take one-day performance of a vessel and say it's not performing very well, but you could take it over 2 or 3 years and say, actually, that particular day was a good day. Do you understand that what I'm saying about sort of the volume, and where do you turn around and say, right, this is valid for design rather than operation?
No, yeah, the design of a ship is not that much interested in the performance of your existing ship. The design of the ship is, so to say, based on, do we have the cargo we wanted to have? Are we running the speed we are targeting on? So just 2 weeks back, an owner came to me, asked for our sensors, our way to integrate the sensors and so on. And yeah, we had a very open discussion. I said, okay, you're having here a 19 knots vessel. Why do you do it now for 19 knots? He didn't know. So on board of his existing ships, there are no sensors. So there was just a comment, yes, please do the vessel as a 19 knots ship. He does not know if he's running that on 17, 16 or 18 knots. And this is the core information in the very beginning. What is my target? Or why do we speed up with the number of ships just because the fuel is so cheap to run?
You're kind of turning around and then saying to the designer, aren't you, or the designer, the owner, the charterer, and saying, you're asking the wrong questions. These are the kind of questions you need to be looking at when it comes to, you're talking, in the container industry, there's been this accepted, yes, the ship must be designed to this kind of speed. Right. But you're turning around and saying, why design the ship to that particular speed? Is that really what you need the vessel for? That's opening up a new set of questions in a way, isn't it?
No, basically speaking, if you see that the vessels, existing vessels, are not performing due to seeing that the performance is going down, it's dropping, then you can raise the questions why. Should we build a smaller engine because it fits better to the real driven speeds? Should we build a wider vessel to have less ballast water? But then you first have to know how much ballast water you're trading, what speeds are you trading, what trim sensibility you have. So the data is available today.
We just have to make use of it.
If I turn to Sasan about Maindeck, can you tell me a little bit about Maindeck here?
We're actually we're focusing on the repairing of shipyards. And we've actually also gone from us trying to do all the work with data to the users themselves generating the data. So more of what you see in the tech world today. And I have to say, from our point of view, we don't see data validation as an issue for sharing. If anything, it's a reason to share more. If you can't validate the data, then you should just change your industry. It's because it really comes down to the person handling the data. It's not the amount of data that's in the way. So we're absolutely for anonymous sharing of data in the industry, and that's really, as we see it, the future. One single point of truth, not only in one company, but also a shareable part of the data in the market.
How do you go around that perspective, though, when you're looking at sort of the performance? Because you're talking about how to minimise off-hire when you talk about performance and dry docking and issues like that.
Yeah, so what we do essentially, it's twofold. On one hand, we help the ship managers create better specifications. And we also base that on previous specifications, machine learning on that. And then when they have that specification in a standardized format, we also remove the middleman because, again, transparency is important. If you're going to reuse the data, you need to have that standardized format to go through the whole value chain so it can also come back. And then you just need to remove the middleman because the middleman is sort of standing in the way of that flow going on. So yeah, I believe just removing the middleman is part of the
That's the part of the chain.
Yeah,
sort of making the efficiency.
Making it all possible, essentially.
Right. Because on your line, on your linear diagram, you had broker, 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 broker. And if you can create a better data chain and then create the loop, you're creating sort of more efficiencies in there. But from the manufacturer's perspective, do you see that being an issue, a problem in terms of the sharing of the data? Or do you see it as a way to sort of improve the performance of the companies, of the manufacturing companies? Because a lot of manufacturing large OEMs, they're going down a service-orientated model these days.
I think when I listen to this talk, can you hear me? Yeah, this discussion on data. Discussion on data is a big challenge because one thing is you say we have these people between the brokers, but we also have a company who have an ownership of some data. And I think that we need to, first of all, find a solution for why should they give their information away to some joint setup? Because if that is the part they need to use for improving their own product, we first of all need to find a situation where you actually have a joint benefit from giving out your information. Unless you solve that problem, I think we will have a big problem just having all this data together. We have the data. If you take all the suppliers and the yards, they have the data. I think sometimes I think you mentioned, is what question do the ship owner actually raise when they say they want to buy a ship? And there it's important to have the ship owner, I think, around the table together with design, but also with suppliers and shipyards and find out how can we optimize this ship. And there you can, of course, use the historical information from your own ship. But just to share it seems very nice from our point of view, but looking into a company, I think it's not so easy. And then you need to look a little bit into the process in companies also, who will actually say, okay, it's fine for us to put it into one big.
But is there this fear that this data could be used against me? Not directly commercially, but somebody could understand how we're performing our vessel, good or bad, and they could actually utilise this and be used for a competitive advantage against me. Is that fear, and is that a really founded fear? Are we generally in the industry scared of data, don't know what it is, don't know what to do with it, and therefore we're going to put a lid on it and not share it? Sasan?
I mean, essentially they should care about the customers, and their customers will be better off if they share data. So it's a first mover advantage. Those who are forward leaning and will start sharing data, and it won't hurt them if they actually know what they're doing, they will gain. and then the others will just have to follow or die. It sounds a bit dramatic, but you know, and that's, I mean, for me, I go to a lot of different seminars, listen to a lot of talks about data. When I'm at shipping conferences, I'm blown away by the lack of understanding of who's really the customer here. Who are we doing what we're doing for? We just forget about that, and the result is tragic almost. It's sad to hear how we're missing the whole point. You know,
well,
we should do stuff better.
Fridtjof's linear definition, the start point is the cargo. The whole point of shipping is to take cargo from A to B. So you had shipping, and part of that loop is going from the design back to the purpose, the very kind of fundamental purpose of why we have shipping, isn't it? So do you find also, Fridtjof, when you're collecting, from Marorka's perspective, when you're collecting all this data, that clients really don't understand it yet? They don't get the need, the benefits that can be found?
I'm basically happy with the customers collecting the data and asking questions about it, asking for advice. Because of course in a shipping company, let's say only the bigger ones, they are able to deal with the data in the right way. But the smaller ones, they need advice, they need visualization, as you say. They need to see how we could learn, what we could learn from those data. But I'd like to make one point. Some years back, I hope most of them are scrapped now, but we have had 750 Panamax vessels on Earth. I think maybe 80% have never seen the Panama Canal. A Panamax vessel is transporting up to 20,000 tons of ballast water. Just transporting that with the energy, 20,000 tons. Meaning, if we would have created, we would have the chance to create more data earlier. If we would know from the cargo perspective down to the designer perspective that we don't need that many Panamax vessels with huge engines running 26 knots, we would have saved a lot of energy for this planet and a lot of CO2. And those vessels being now in that bottomless pit, commercially wise, because of the Panamax vessel, yes, we do.
But that's partly because the charterer, the sort of brass plate owner of vessels, they see ships as standard assets. They understand the standard asset. They have some owners have a very straightforward vision of what a ship is, and it's a financial asset on the bottom, with a bottom line that has to make the money through a charter. They're not interested in the technical operational aspects of that. In some ways, you're asking them to get engaged in that discussion.
This is exactly the problem. Yeah, if you think about the vessel as an asset, especially in the crisis today, you must learn that the asset value might drop down by 90% easily, just because not built to the cargo perspective.
I did have an interesting conversation about 2 years ago with a German banker who admitted that from a banking perspective, when it came to the covenants within a loan to an owner, they said all of a sudden we as the banker are owning that covenant, we're having to understand the technology of the ship now. We're taking a much stronger interest because there is this operational requirement, and it links to the operational requirement that becomes a commercial, yes, that ship's going to get a charter before that ship, but also there's is it meeting the regulatory challenges that are facing as well. So there are those two aspects of the industry that all of a sudden the financial markets were taking a stronger interest in the operational performance of the ship, not just seeing it as an asset on a spreadsheet in terms of the commercial viability. And that must be very good for the equipment makers here, because all of a sudden they're collecting the data, they're able to demonstrate the performance, they're able to demonstrate what they've got as well and collect the data. And to some of the managers as well, like Sasan was saying, who can then utilise this in a way that's beneficial. In terms of the visualisation of this, do we need to create a simplified version to start educating that start of the loop, the owner, the financial, the parts of the industry that have hitherto not had much interest in the operational performance of the ship. Do we need to start with a very sort of simplified version of what they can get out of it before we ramp up to sort of say, look, this is what we really mean by the operational performance?
I think definitely a visualization that is easily understandable for everybody in the value chain is very important, and it's very easy for us engineers to be excited about technical details and the beauty of the technical details, but I think we live in very interesting times now. When we look around, people are being a lot more open, businesses are being a lot more open about the performance in general, and I think the opportunity that we have here by taking all the parties on a platform where they can discuss what's actually happening from a data that is actual data from the real world, and where you can see then where there are these inefficiencies that we can get rid of just by better decisions and knowing what is the truth and how we can operate a little bit more efficient. And I think the opportunities that we have now with the technology that we have now, and I guess just the general atmosphere in the societies, I think there are now is a very good time to start these changes and start this visualization and get everybody on board.
What in that loop, Fridtjof, there was the regulatory side of it didn't appear too much in the loop because it was very much a commercial link between performance and the commercial aspect of it. I know that classification societies will say, well, look, we look at performance, we write that into our rules, and that becomes how or what we require a ship to do and be from a class perspective. What can you say about that part of the that feedback loop? Because the class societies will say, well, we do take performance and we use that when we write our rules.
That's true. Having the EEDI, having the MRV, all these new things, they are not class rules, they are IMO rules, basically speaking. But yes, of course, you get more feedback, you get more learning out of that. But still, this does say so much very often, let's say, about the CO2 emissions per deadweight ton. The Panmax example, the 20,000 tons deadweight going to ballast water, is still a lousy example in this way. So we have a certain learning from that, but we can do much more. And this we should do. We should at least know where, in which field we are playing. And if we share this not with the full chain, we should at least share it with a part of the chain. That we get to know, so to say, and can compare us into our fleet, with our designer, and or to the other side with our charterer. This is just a wish to it.
And Jenny, if I'm taking that to another level, sort of a more granular level, because you can get one manufacturer of a piece of equipment on a vessel to fine-tune, but that could have a positive or negative impact on another piece of equipment. So you could have a water purifier, for example, that's been better optimized because the manufacturer thinks that's great, I've got a more optimum use of the energy into that water purifier, but it could have another impact on another piece of equipment in the engine. So at what point do you say, okay, we need to share all of this data with everybody because it might just be useful? Then you end up with a spider web of information sharing rather than a more focused, as Fridtjof saying, in terms of design, going back to the loop. You've got certain parameters, you've got certain pieces of information, data that can actually be fed back. But how do you kind of rationalise the argument that what you're doing in one part is not having a negative impact on another part?
We don't, and I think that is for sure a challenge. And I think that's why people very often look in vessel performance, where you have to go in and take all this information together and see the performance of the ship. And as mentioned, we should not do it for 3 months, but for the lifetime of a ship. The problem is still to have the manufacturers also to see what they gain for putting the information in. But there's no doubt that talking together with all these different kind of components you have in a ship is very important, that when you optimize one place, you don't actually make the ship worse. But I think also what we have to, when you talk about the total cost of a ship, some ship owners go in and look into total cost of ownership, but some don't. But where we actually also sometimes have a huge problem is when you have second-hand ships, because then you go to the bankers and they are not always very good in looking into the performance of the ship. They just look into the daily cost, where if you look into maybe the more total running cost, it would be another good case. And if you as a ship owner have a ship and you want to really to have the best technology on board and the best performing ship, you also need that the second-hand ship's price is higher. But it's not always like that, and I think there's also some parameters we need to put into this consideration in order really to see, because then you will also, if you have, for instance, first-class equipment, see that there is a value after the ship has been sold.
Because that's the difference between Capex and OPEX on the bottom line. When you look at the operational perspective, that obviously gets put into the operational expenses. But when you're coming into the ship design, that's a capital expense usually on an owner and operator's balance sheet. So it's having that life cycle aspect of it. But when it comes down to the dry dockings, when it comes to the operational side of things, and you look at that performance, do you think there's any way that that can be better utilised, that lifetime dry docking expense, for example, can be seen more as a way of utilising or better utilising that information when it comes to the Capex that's going to be made into a new building? See what I'm saying? I'm asking whether there's a better way to sort of look at that operational expense that Jenny was talking about, and using things like dry dockings, the investment and the costs of dry dockings, and saying, right, okay, this design of a ship had this amount spent on it during its dry docking lifetime. We can do better with this and create a better ship by looking at it that way.
Absolutely, and that's what we're working on as well. And so we're just removing the middleman and letting the data, so you start with creating a project specification, and that goes through the whole negotiation process with the yard, and then also project management. And then what you have is a detailed price list, final price list of every item for that project specification. It's usually 300 items. Now if you do that for every single company, which they are doing today on an Excel sheet, then it doesn't give you that much insight. But if you can make that data anonymous and share it, pretty much like Sanetta is doing on containers, I mean, it's idiot-proof, the whole concept. Then you know what the actual service cost is of every bits and piece on the ship. And it's really not that hard. People talk about the ship as if it's rocket science somehow. I started working 4 years as a mechanic. It doesn't take you long to know every bits and piece on the ship. The only reason we can't use that data is because it's unstructurized and it's kept in silos, not even for each and every company, but between co-workers, because they don't have a shared system. And when they do have systems, they don't have APIs, so they don't talk to each other.
Well, it goes back to people not knowing what the data is. They don't know what they've got, do they, Fridtjof? They've got the data, they may have the information in different silos, in different parts of the company even, different departments have got the data. But it's understanding, so how do you get even an operator, ship operator, to realise that you've got that pile of data, you've got that silo of data, you've got to find a way to sort of use that data between each other to see what you can better do.
Marorka. For Marorka, it is basically a lot of training we are doing with our customers. Meaning, okay, we have the data collection on board, we make them visible on board, we have the advice on board. So the crew is, so to say, hardly involved, and this is very important. But for the shore people, the ones doing the next decisions, doing the next charter parties, and so on, so you have to have use of the data as well. So we make them visible for them, extractable, but still, the program's getting bigger, we have to do a coaching. The people have to use the tool. The people have to find out what they can do with the data. And it's totally different if you're talking to a chemical tanker than to a container vessel, if you're talking to somebody paying the fuel to somebody not paying the fuel. So the idea what to do with the data is totally different. The program can cope them all, but with a separation of training and a separation of discussing, okay, you want to extract the tool, those data for your specific needs. That's absolutely important.
Do you think there's a growing awareness, going back to that, I was asking Sasan about the fear and not knowing what you've got. Do you think though that there is now, everybody seems to be talking, we've had two years ago, everybody was talking about eco-ships, and it was data, then it was big data, now it's analytics. We've had, you know, this iteration of information, basically, with data, big data, analytics. Are people now beginning to go, oh, okay, it's data, it can be useful? Is the industry waking up to this, data, it's there, it can be used better?
So our main talks here at the North Shipping.
Just making people aware, making ship owners, operators more aware.
People are aware that something's changing, and people ask, well, how can I be part of that change? How can I make use of my data? How can I visualize my data? And also, how can I share that data? It's, let's say, at least in every second talk we have here at North Shipping, it's just about those topics. Seldom among the whole chain, but mainly towards the next department, towards my charterer only.
That's a step in the right, what you're saying is that's a step in the right direction.
Yes.
To what that ultimate feedback loop is all about. That's starting to look, okay, who's to my left, who's to my right. How does that feedback loop eventually go? You were nodding your head then, Jenny, saying, you know, I guess you're saying, yes, people are becoming aware, even the equipment makers are becoming aware.
For sure, if you look around you will see that the equipment manufacturers, actually all of them, starting really to go into this and put a lot of resources into it. But I'm also a little bit hesitant to say we have been talking about big data, we have been talking about digitalization for a long time. And I think what we need now, and I feel that that is also what you see in the industry, is that we need to take the next step now. We need to do something, not just talk about it. And I think that you have the big data. The question is how to collect them, and then we need also in the industry on a higher level than national company to find an international level where we all can join. I almost say have one plug-in for this information, and to find a way where the other end you don't actually put them on one company, but you have the full picture of
so
the
an
ship.
international standard, an international platform for all the kinds of data. Sasan.
Completely agree, and I think the problem is that the decision makers really don't know what they're talking about. I mean, let's be honest about. I was at a forum a few weeks ago. There were, I believe, 7 presentations on data sharing, not a single mention of APIs. I mean, it's ridiculous, the whole thing. I fear that this is just another, like 2 years ago we were talking about big data. I fear that it's just going to blow over, which it will if we don't start bringing on more tech people that actually can do and can execute. Because most of the people talking about this stuff don't know what they're talking about.
So you're talking about it being more than just a buzzword?
Yeah, I mean, we need the people who can actually get the flow there. I mean, that can establish those channels. And most of the companies talking about data sharing, they don't have the technical people in the room even when they're talking about it.
I'm going to give the last word to Fridtjof before we close the panel. Fridtjof, is that, you see, is true? Is that what's the hindrance in creating that feedback loop that we're talking about?
At least one of those, yes, absolutely. So people sometimes say they want to share the data while having no clue. Companies, well, yeah, we have an own IT, we can do it by ourselves. They could not even log me to their beamer. So this is happening today, but I think we are on a good way because it's on the top.
Just the one word suddenly sprung to my head then, trust. Not trusting the data, but trusting who you're sharing the data with, surely.
Exactly, very important, very important. Still in a moment, mostly we have the separation. And sometimes even within the company, I don't share my data with the next department. This is also happening. That we can feel, because why others should not the purchasing department do the purchase, as long as they don't see the benefit of that, they don't purchase. So it's a way of trust, it's a way of convince, and then to create data.
Lovely. Jenny, gentlemen, I'm going to have to close unless you've got a very, very key important thing to say there, Sasan.
We fear what we don't know. So in order to have the trust, we just need to learn more about what we're talking about.
Good. Jenny, gentlemen, thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. Thank you. And thank you. And thank you. And thank you.